Hey guys, I'm with Ruth Sowter, sex, love, and relationship coach. How are you doing today, Ruth?
Hi, Matt. Great. Thanks so much for having me here.
No problem. I know it's really early in your time, 5 a.m., and then
Yeah.
we're communicating across the world. It's 1 p.m. for me. So I really appreciate you jumping on the call today.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, so last time we talked, you were telling me about a handful of things related to like sexuality and coaching, and how people think of sex, and how it tends to be the thing that gets repressed the most. You mentioned that last time. Tell
Mm.
us a little bit about uh, sex coaching and love, and how that ties into love and relationship coaching, and kick us off with a little explanation of what's going on with your business.
Yeah, sex coaching is really fascinating, and it's kind of an ideal topic for coaching in a way, because as soon as you start exploring sex, love, or relationships, which are the areas that I work in, you start getting into really deep personal areas for people. So all of our deepest fears really come up quite quickly when we start talking about sexuality. And as well as that, it's something that most of us have repressed in one way or another throughout our lives. So we have kind of this bundle of funky relating habits that we have around sexuality generally. Even those of us who feel like we're quite enlightened tend to have a little bit of anxiety about it in one way or another. So it's a great way to go to get right into the core of the fears that we have about life. So basically working on sex, love, relationships is not only amazing for people's personal lives, but it just starts to shift everything else in your life as well. Because when you've got rid of any guilt, shame, anxiety, fears around your sexuality and about yourself and your body and your relationship and all of that kind of stuff, it's like, what's going to scare you when you've dealt with that, right? Like every other part of your life starts feeling more empowered as well. It's really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really fascinating. And how exactly does your fears and anxieties related to sex, how does that show up in different areas of life?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it can show up in all sorts of different ways. The way that it used to show up for me, which was that I was in a very unhealthy relationship, and I had a lot of patterns of kind of unworthiness and feeling undeserving that I hadn't really realized were, well, I mean, we don't come into life knowing all the reasons for our behaviors, do we? But like I had a lot of people pleasing, um, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and found myself in repeat unhealthy relationship patterns,
Hmm.
um, which really played out in the bedroom. But I thought, so long as at that stage, that as long as you were having sex, you had a good sex life, and as long as it wasn't completely unsatisfactory for both of you, that you're actually winning. Because there's so much stuff in the media about, oh, so many women can't orgasm. I was like, well, I'm orgasming, so must be pretty good.
Right.
Um, and completely failed to see that there were a lot of funky dynamics that I had in my relationship that were playing out in life and also in the bedroom, and that kind of became a bit more obvious towards the end. So the background for my coming to this work was a 17-year relationship that kind of had a slow and gritty demise towards the end. Um, but sexuality was really, if I had known, was really a sign that things were going wrong for a long time before that actually started to happen, because we'd fallen into ruts, into patterns, and we would go through long dry patches where sex just wasn't there at all. And I didn't realize at the time that that was actually a way that we could have reconnected, and that we could have also understood a lot more about what was going on between us, as well as what was going on for us personally. So it's kind of a really amazing portal into what's happening in your
Yeah,
life.
that's what it sounds like. That's what I've learned from you already, based on this just talking to you for a couple minutes. Is like is the problems that you're experiencing maybe in a sexual context are actually maybe the same problems that show up in a different context. So that to me is really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. And when you start to explore that, and it's even giving yourself permission to explore that, and permission for your sexuality and your satisfaction in terms of sexuality and ease with it, even just giving yourself permission for that is incredibly liberating for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I know for me, it was like, oh my God, it's okay to even think about how good this could be and how it is for me. So it's really
Hmm.
cool.
I'm really curious how, like, without obviously giving too much information away, um, what are like some typical examples of struggles and challenges that your clients experience?
Typical examples would be that kind of pattern of that's really, really common. It's common to the point where there's a lot of, kind of social mythology around it. It's like when this pattern of meeting somebody, having incredible passion and chemistry with them, and then that just sort of dwindling and disappearing
Mm-hmm.
after a little while. That's one of the classic ones. I mostly work with women, and for women, classic things are like just not feeling like they can get out of their heads,
Okay.
to be present for sexuality, and then when feeling that they can't get out of their heads, not prioritizing it, it kind of can cause some disconnection with them if they have a partner, and if they're single as well, it can cause a disconnection to neglect sort of your erotic life, causes a disconnect within you as well. So self-esteem starts to be eroded, and there can start to be kind of this subtle disconnection and resentment after a while as well, because there's an awareness that, oh, I should be doing that, and I can't get out of my head. It can be quite a subtle but negative cycle that goes on,
Okay.
and so one of the first things that I work with clients on is recognizing that, and then starting to understand, like, what does it feel like in your body to be able to get out of your head, and what's a yes and what's a no, because honestly a lot of us nobody tells us how to know whether we're actually how to feel empowered in saying yes or no, or what we're willing to do. So many people tell me that they feel like they don't want to even start initiating sexually, because they feel like if they initiate, then they have to go all the way through. Like, there's all of these weird rules that we have in our heads about it. So like, even just the permission to be like, oh, well, you can decide how you want it to be, is like mind blowing for a lot of people. Like, what?
That you have choice around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what if someone's experiencing disconnection, like with their partner, let's say, uh,
Mm.
what does that mean? And like, what does that mean in the rest of their life? Like, in what way are they disconnected in the rest of their life?
It can show up in all sorts of different ways. People pleasing is a big one.
Okay.
The What tends to happen is there's a degree of hiding in your life. When you're hiding from yourself sexually, that'll show up in other ways, as a kind of a block.
What?
So does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm just really curious. In what ways does it show up? Like
Um,
hiding.
yeah, so like things like lack of confidence,
Okay.
definitely lack of worthiness is a big one. So struggles around being able to ask for promotions, being able to ask for money, being able to ask for what we need in any aspect of life.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. And that ability to say yes and no's, that is one of the biggest indicators I see, because what's going on for you, if you feel like you can't receive, or you feel like sex is an obligation, then that tends to be a pattern that you're repeating in other places as well. And that could be in the office, it could be with your family, it could be all of the above.
Mm. And so the two things you've been saying are the two main things that you've been saying that maybe it shows up in, or A, like setting boundaries, it seems like saying
Mm-hmm.
yes or no to things, and then B, like asking for things, and I guess maybe expressing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would that be right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
It has a big impact in, particularly I notice in people that have creative jobs, that they'll feel blocked and stuck with that as well. Like, when because when we have a block around our sexuality, it kind of just stymies our freedom to express ourselves,
Uh,
in every different part of life.
yeah.
So yeah.
So is sex like is it kind of like a symptom, like is it a way to kind of unify everything else in your life? Is it kind of like a symbol of like, this is the energy that if everything else is going well, like this will feel like it's healthy too? Does it work like that? I don't know if that question's confusing.
I think I know what you mean. Are you saying, is sex the cause or the effect, or are you saying?
um is it just like the center of all energies? That's the way that I'm hearing it from you. Is it's kind of like a symbol, and uh like, it's hard to explain, but I guess, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
maybe it relates to cause and effect.
Yeah, I think is it a cause and effect? I mean, I can't ultimately answer that because it kind of works both ways, but
Okay.
definitely it will, because it's so related to our self-relationship and because it's so related with our body relationship as well, it does affect everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. Is it, what does healthy sexual expression look like?
Healthy sexual expression just looks really comfortable, easy, and pleasurable. So, and it looks quite different to what a lot of us have learned that it should look. So, one of the nicest things about learning how to give consent properly, how to do tantra techniques, how to feel free in the bedroom, is that we do learn that it's totally okay to be like no, or like yes to a foot massage, no to anything else, or to be able to go completely wild as well. Like when we give ourselves that permission, we're able to create true intimacy with our partner, because they can actually see what we really want, because we're not kind of trying to act out this role that we think we should be acting out. And doing that, we give them permission to be the same. So then we can actually meet each other as we actually are, which is surprisingly rare. And when you do that, then it's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly beautiful what you can create with the other person. And it gives you permission for sex to look really, really different to that kind of Hollywood, like you start out kissing and then you whatever, because
Right,
it can
so it
mean
doesn't have
that.
to fit into that mold of how I guess we're taught about it in society, and it's more. I mean, I don't want to explain
Yeah.
because I'm not the expert, but it's like it seems like it's not what society is telling us it's about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like we've got this kind of recipe prescription that we've all learned, where sex starts out with foreplay and ends with climax. And when you learn more about sexuality and you start exploring tantra or just exploring sexuality in itself, it's like you realize that orgasm doesn't have to be the goal. It doesn't have to look a particular way. And also, like, just have to dispel the myth, because if any of your audience have heard about Sting, you know, the whole 8 hours of tantric sex thing, it doesn't have to be like a sex marathon either. Like, it can literally be anything that's going to be fulfilling for the two of you. And that's just such a relief and so beautiful to know that.
Yeah. So why aren't we taught that as a society? Like, what's wrong with sex education? That, and what could be changed about that, in your opinion?
There's still a lot of fear around sexuality. Still a lot of fear, shame, guilt, and not just in society, but even a lot of therapists still have that.
Okay.
And when we have it when we have that, it's kind of, it comes through, even if we're telling everybody, oh, you should be sexually liberated, it's totally fine. Like, if it's not coming from a place of authenticity, everybody else can feel that it isn't. So there's fear of, you know, STDs, obviously. There's also like a lot of cultural legacy that is very, very real, though, where women have been taught that their sexuality is it's a risky thing. And it's a bit of a minefield in a lot of ways for women to navigate as well. It's like, oh, you should be sexual, but not too sexual. You should know when to be sexual. You shouldn't pick the wrong time, though, and it's going to be a disaster.
Right.
There's that side. And then men have just as much, like, anxiety and baggage coming in as well, with like, oh, well, you should be like this James Bond kind of character, but you should also be sensitive. You should never push it too hard, but you should definitely push it. And then you've got the Me Too movement. I've talked to so many guys who are like, I just don't know what to do anymore. I'm just out. I'm out.
That's really funny. Yeah, and to jump off that, like, how do these sexual problems show up differently in different genders? You touched on it already, but like, what tends to be the problem that women have, and then what tends to be the problems that men have?
I think the core problems tend to be the same. What I see with men and women, like, you don't have to scratch the surface very hard to find that the same like fears of rejection, uncertainty around how to communicate, and being able to actually own desire. So and men probably, if there is as much of a difference, it probably would be that, and what I see in men is that there's a real anxiety and concern around owning their sexuality, because they're so keen to not seem aggressive. And they've been taught that male desire is, you know, the cause of so many problems in the world. When you're carrying that inside of you, that's a really heavy
Mm-hmm.
burden.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a lot of internal disharmony. And for women, where was I going with that? The ways that it shows up.
Right. Oh yeah, the way it shows up for women, like the problem.
And
Yeah.
for women, there's a lot of parts of female sexuality that have been kind of not okay to express as well. Being too sexual, being too orgasmic.
Mm-hmm.
Women are often not struggling, but like negotiating this line of like the being sexual but not too sexual. Like, don't be a slut, but don't be a prude, right? It's like, where do you fit that in, and how does that look in different parts of your life?
Right.
But I think women at the moment have a bit more permission to explore and to express
Right.
different aspects of their sexuality probably than men do.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like from what you're hearing that the problems are really exactly the same. Like, it's about how do you express it appropriately, and like not be too aggressive, but be assertive enough. Like, but it's like that tricky balance where it seems like we're not really taught as a society how to balance those two things between aggression and being assertive.
And it really does come down to those two things, because it's like there's a lot more fear. If you feel like you can't say no, then somebody making a pass at you or something is a much bigger threat to if you feel completely comfortable saying no.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it really feeds on itself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you know what I've noticed in my community, like of people my age, and men my age, is like exactly what you were saying, like, and especially in light of the Me Too movement, is that I know my friend, he's like seeing a sex therapist, and he was Me Too'd actually, and he is trying to figure out how to like handle all this stuff, and in light of like everything that has happened to him, and it's just really tricky because he's saying that there's like no education like around it up to his point, up to like throughout his whole life, and now he's working with a therapist like really intensively to work on his issues. It's hard. The education's hard, and I feel like for men it shows up in a way that they're like addicted to like porn and all this stuff. Did you have this say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense that porn would be a great outlet when real life is like such a minefield to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest gap in sexual education that I see. And it varies a lot, obviously, in different schools, different countries, what people learn. But like teaching a healthy consent culture would be such a powerful thing for people for every aspect in their lives, because we do get into trouble when we're trying to negotiate and learn. It's like a lot of situations that I see people are in, they especially when they're younger, like they just haven't learnt yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you're not allowed to make mistakes. And this is not saying that people don't do bad things either, but it's very difficult when you're trying to learn as you do it how to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And then people just end up feeling bad about themselves, feeling like their sexuality is something that they're out of control of, and it's evil, and men are this and women are that, and it's all, it gets a lot of drama and a lot of struggle that just I don't think should have to be there.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think we definitely need a reform in the way we're talking about sex and everything. Do you see anyone doing it particularly well, like being a really good educator in this space?
Well, I would say my own teacher is doing a brilliant job, Layla Martin.
Okay.
She's amazing. There's a lot of good education out there for people that are open to looking for it. But I think it's still very, very confronting for a lot of people. And that's part of the reason that it kind of pushed me into the profession, because I feel like, because I came from such a kind of struggly, prudish kind of background, like if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I feel like we need more and more therapists that can make it feel very safe, because there are a lot of people out there that are sort of waving the bandwagon for sexual freedom, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, if you're anything like me 5 years ago, it's like, oh my God, no, like that's just too much. So I think, I think gradually it's becoming more and more mainstream, but, and in terms of teachers, Layla Martin, there's a lot of amazing amazing resources out there, even just in the media. Like there's a lot of good articles. So anybody who's open-minded can find this stuff. It's just a matter of feeling that it's okay and safe to explore it, really.
So it's really that initial step that's the hardest, is feeling like you're okay to like investigate this topic.
Yeah, and I think there's that kind of, a lot of people will look at sexuality in a kind of titillation kind of way. Like they'll read magazine articles and they'll be like, oh, look what swingers do or whatever.
Okay.
But I think it's about being a little bit more normal about it and being like, oh, actually, I want to explore this. Like I don't want to just laugh at what fringe dwellers do or feel relieved that I don't have erectile dysfunction and therefore I'm doing pretty well. You know, it's like actually you can do more, and it's worth doing more, because every single aspect of your life is going to benefit. You know, you're going to feel better in yourself, like you deserve it for yourself. You're definitely going to feel better in your relationship, and like you deserve that, your partner deserves that. And then if you have kids, like if you have friends, if you have anybody that cares about you, like it's worth supporting yourself in that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm really glad you just outlined the benefits of it, because that sounds like, I mean, everyone should investigate. Everyone who is open-minded enough about this topic should investigate it into it, because there's so many benefits to it. What do you recommend? Like, what action steps do you recommend people take if they want to express their sexuality more and are open to it?
There's a lot of good resources online. I'd say that's a good place to start, because very safe. So Layla Martin, obviously me. There's some good, I would say start online, like read a couple of articles, see what you're interested in. And then like there's amazing workshops available in most cities now. You can follow sex educators. I think just allowing yourself to starting really, really gently. Like you don't have to dive in and start working with a sex therapist straight away. But starting to explore it, starting to just, and starting to get more comfortable with yourself. And then basically giving yourself permission to explore it, and then realizing that you are worthy of it. So honestly, I would love everyone to work with a sex coach. I just don't think anybody's ever going to regret, oh, I really wish I hadn't got really good at sex and relationships, right? Like I wish I'd put that off longer.
It only can improve life.
Yeah. But I would say also be selective, like choose someone that you feel safe with, someone that you vibe with, make sure they are qualified, and that'll be one of the best investments in yourself and all of the other things that I've talked about that you'll ever make.
Awesome. How do you know when you're ready to work with a sex coach?
You just know. Like if you have that little inkling, it's worth exploring it. I really encourage people not to do what I do and like ignore that little inkling for like 10 years.
Okay.
Like if you start feeling like, oh, like we really limit ourselves in that way as well. Like if you start feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm a bit inhibited and I wish I wasn't, don't ignore it. Like see if you can like talk to someone. Most coaches will do a free session so you can explore with a few different people who vibes with, read books, listen to podcasts, all of that kind of stuff, but do something, because over time what starts out as a tiny thing where it's just like, oh, we're just going through a dry patch, or we feel a little bit disconnected, you know, after a few years of that, then that has then that's really starts to impact on your self-esteem and your relationship.
Gotcha. If someone wants to work with you, how could they get in touch?
Yeah, the best way would be jump online and check out my website, ruthsowter.com. I can send you the link for that. And yeah, you can either follow me. I'm on all of the social media.
Okay.
Or you can hit me up for a free call. I do free 20-minute calls for anybody who's intrepid enough to dip their toes in to exploring this.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely include that link. Any other particular closing thoughts you have that you wanted to share with us? Any action steps or anything?
Action steps, closing thoughts. I would just say just do it. People, just explore. Just give yourself permission to explore sexuality and tantra if you're open to that. Yeah, like as I keep saying, I don't think you'll ever regret it. And that's the message, really.
I love it. Great, simple message, and I know I can see a lot of truth to that. So thanks so much for sharing your insights today. It's really great to have you as an expert in the subject. I hope that anyone listening gets a lot of value out of this, and I encourage them definitely listen to Ruth's advice. Like go open yourself up to explore this topic, and I encourage you to book a call with Ruth too if it sounds like you're a good fit.